Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating and honestly sometimes shocking world of judicial misconduct and accountability right here in California. We're specifically focusing our lens on what happens behind the bench when court officials are admonished for breaking the very rules they're sworn to uphold. It's a real deep dive into the mechanisms of judicial discipline, and we're drawing on detailed case files from all across the state.
Okay, let's look at our docket for today. First, judging the judges. Second, the biased emails. Then we'll cover the hidden conflict, delays, and deceit. And finally, we'll look at the overall impact on the system.
All right, Section 1, Judging the Judges.
We really have to ask ourselves a crucial question here. When a judge wields immense power over people's lives, like literally the power to deprive someone of their liberty, to separate families, or to finalize massive financial disputes, but then they cross a serious ethical line, who actually holds them accountable? I mean, they are the ultimate authority in their courtrooms, right? So who serves as the authority over them?
Well, in California, that job falls to an independent state body known as the CJP, or the California Commission on Judicial Performance. Think of them as the state's constitutional watchdog. Their whole job is to investigate complaints against judges. And if they find that a judge has willfully violated ethical canons, they can issue what's called a public admonishment. Basically, it's a formal, very public reprimand that drags the judge's ethical violations into the daylight and permanently stamps their public record. So how does this actually work? It's kind of like a bureaucracy wearing judicial robes. First, a strictly confidential complaint is filed with the CJP. Then, they do an evaluation and a preliminary investigation. If the evidence actually holds up, it moves into formal proceedings. And finally, if it's proven, you get that public discipline. But here's the kicker. Because of strict confidentiality rules, private admonishments or closed investigations, we might never even hear about them. We only find out about the cases that make it all the way to step 4.
Moving on to Section 2, the biased emails out of Shasta County.
Okay, the sheer shock value of these words coming from a sitting judge is just staggering. Back in November 1997, Judge Gregory M. Caskey was presiding over juvenile dependency matters in Shasta County, and the CJP found that he was engaging in highly improper, off-the-record email communications with an attorney who regularly appeared before him. He was actually messaging this attorney about a pending case, asking if he should deny the opposing counsel a hearing. In one message, he literally typed, "I say screw the father." And when that attorney rightfully refused to engage with him off the record, Judge Caskey replied by calling him a chicken. Seriously, it was a massive display of prejudgment, completely aligning the judge with one side of a very sensitive case.
Now, despite this completely clear bias, the CJP only issued a public admonishment in July 1998. You might be wondering why? Well, they looked at some mitigating factors, things like his long judicial service, his work in judicial education, his expressed remorse, and the fact that he hadn't been disciplined before. But the massive takeaway here is this. That public admonishment didn't actually remove Judge Caskey from office. Nope. He stayed right there on the bench in Shasta County until taking deferred retirement in 2003, years after this all went down.
Let's jump into Section 3, the hidden conflict in Modoc County.
86? That number is just wild. Modoc County Superior Court Judge David A. Mason failed to disclose his close personal relationship with a local defense attorney in at least 86 separate criminal cases over an 11-year period. The California Code of Judicial Ethics explicitly requires judges to disclose any information that might make a reasonable person doubt their impartiality. So, presiding over 86 cases involving a close friend without telling the prosecution, or the public for that matter, that is a massive structural failure.
But, the cover-up almost always makes it worse. Between 2009 and 2020, this undisclosed conflict just kept going. Finally, in December 2019, the CJP issued a public admonishment. But during the investigation itself, Judge Mason lacked candor. He actually lied to the commission, falsely claiming that he always and routinely made full disclosures, which was demonstrably false. So, because he lied to the state's highest judicial oversight body and showed bias against the local district attorney's office, the CJP came back a year later, in December 2020, and escalated his discipline to a severe public admonishment. Ultimately, his conscious disregard for the truth caught up with him big time. To resolve that 2020 disciplinary action, Judge Mason was forced into a binding stipulation. He accepted the severe public admonishment, yeah, but it came with a huge condition: a binding agreement to never, ever serve in a judicial capacity again. He was permanently banned from the bench. And honestly, his actions created a giant vulnerability for the county, giving people grounds for post-conviction appeals just based on the fact that they were denied a neutral arbiter in all those cases.
All right, Section 4, Delays and Deceit out of Trinity County.
200. That is the number of days Trinity County Superior Court Judge Michael Harryford would routinely delay his decisions. The CJP found it to be a verified fact that over a 4-year period, Judge Harryford committed willful misconduct by chronically delaying his rulings across 20 separate matters. And some of these stretched well over 200 days. It's a complete dereliction of duty, leaving regular citizens just stuck in legal limbo for months on end. And here's where it gets incredibly deceitful. In California, judges actually have to sign a sworn affidavit to get their paycheck. They have to swear under penalty of perjury that they have absolutely no matters pending beyond 90 days. Well, Judge Hurryford, he routinely signed these false salary affidavits anyway. He was essentially committing perjury just to secure his paycheck, all while denying citizens their fundamental right to a timely ruling. It's just a complete night and day divergence between his sworn statements and the verified reality of his own courtroom. Because he also made misleading statements to the ethics body during their investigation, showing what they called a conscious disregard of the limits of judicial authority, his actions earned him a massive sanction in October 2025. The CJP hit Judge Hereford with a public censure. Now, you have to understand, a public censure is the absolute highest, strongest penalty the commission can possibly issue without just outright firing a judge and removing them from the bench entirely.
Finally, Section 5, the impact on the system. When you look at these 3 cases together, it really paints a clear, somewhat concerning picture. We've got 3 judges from 3 different counties. Judge Caskey in Shasta showed extreme bias, got a public admonition, but was allowed to hang around until deferred retirement. Judge Mason in Modoc hid 86 conflicts of interest, lied about it, got a severe public admonition, and was permanently banned. Then Judge Hereford in Trinity essentially committed perjury to get paid while neglecting his docket and received a public censure. So while all 3 faced heavily documented severe misconduct, the bureaucratic response was primarily just public exposure. And that exposure only sometimes resulted in their immediate removal from the bench.
Which brings us to the absolute core of the issue today, when those who judge us, the people holding the gavel, violate the very ethical and legal laws they're entrusted to uphold. Is a bureaucratic reprimand, basically a public shaming on a state website, truly enough to protect the scales of justice? Or does it expose a system where court officials operate with a level of impunity that would just never be tolerated for the everyday citizens standing before them? It's definitely a question worth asking the next time you step into a courtroom. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the systems around you.